And welcome to our next live Q&A session of the Tunisian Crochet Summit. So for this session, I am joined by Kristine from Ambassador Crochet. So welcome, Kristine. And while Kristine is introducing herself, if that is okay with you, Kristine, I am just going to go and put us live in the Facebook group as well. So off you go. All right. It's done, I think. So Kristine, would you like to just share a little bit about your business, how long you have been a designer, when you started Tunisian crochet, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I started designing in 2007, which sounds crazy to me.
Wow.
Yeah, that sounds crazy to me, but so 17 years I've been designing. It's kind of started by accident. I had a friend who was pregnant and had a preemie, like 10-week preemie.
Uh-huh.
So she was only about 30 weeks pregnant, and back then there was no internet. I hate to say it was that long ago, but there was no internet. So I couldn't go online looking for patterns, and I was just like browsing book after book after book after book, and I could not find what I was looking for. And so I was like, I just knew what I didn't want, but I didn't know what I wanted. And so I just kind of, after a couple weeks of looking, I was like, I just need a blanket. And I decided to try and design my own, and I fell in love with designing. And I've been designing ever since. So that was kind of like my backstory on how I became, a designer. Um, and then a couple years in, maybe a year into it, I started a blog. And I would just randomly get, like, I was trying different techniques for designing and things like that, and I would get a lot of Tunisian questions. And so I just kind of have snowballed that into my design process over the years. It's a completely different technique, but I really enjoy it and I like it. And yeah, I used to get a lot of questions. There's a lot more designers out there now, so I think the questions are spread a little thinner. I don't get daily or weekly questions anymore, but that's kind of where my journey with it started.
Yeah, you're right. It's completely different, isn't it? But I think when you see it, there's just something about the texture of the fabric and what you can do with colors and everything. It's just so unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
think once you see it, it's hard to not kind of fall in love
and
with it, isn't it?
there's also that part of me that, like, I always wanted to learn to knit. And for those that don't know, I have 6 kids. So when my kids were little, I wanted to learn to knit, and I was just like, I don't have any more brain power for anything else. I was like, it'll be one of those someday projects. Someday I'll learn to knit. Someday and and after a few years of doing Tunisian, I was like, you know what? It almost looks identical. This is my fix. I don't need to learn to knit anymore. One of my girls has since, now my kids are all teenagers now, but one of my girls has learned to knit, and she's like, someday I'll teach you. I'm like, I'm good. I got Tunisian. I don't need to learn to knit.
Yeah, you can get the same effect.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think if you're short on time, definitely. But for me anyway, crochet is a bit more satisfying because I feel like I was getting to the end of projects faster. And
Yes.
I think I'm the world's slowest knitter. So every
Yeah.
winter, every other winter, I will knit myself something, but it's literally the entire season. And then
Exactly. Yeah.
it may or may not be finished. But
Yep.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think Tunisian is good that way, isn't it? It kind of combines. It
Ex-
combines the best of both worlds.
Yep.
So Kristine's class is all about Tunisian crochet blankets. So if you are here with us live and you have questions about your blankets, please do pop them into the chat and we will both do our absolute best to answer them. So Kristine, I did request questions from people before we started the summit, so I have a few of those on hand if that is okay with you to get started. So this is from Shell. So she is saying, what would be the best method to join squares in a Tunisian crochet blanket? After blocking, some of my squares have ended up larger than others. And she's wondering if she should add a border on some of the sides or all of the sides to make all of the squares the same size. So what do you think about that?
I think it depends on the look you're going for. Mm, Me personally, I would block them to all the same size, but you can always add regular crochet to your Tunisian. So you can always do like a single crochet border all the way around, to make it easier to join them. So I have done that in the past where I do a Tunisian block and then I add a single crochet border. And then it's easier to block them. It's easier to join them when they have that common stitch, you know, instead of all being a different stitch on each row. So I feel like that's the easiest way. If you're going to add a single crochet border, maybe add it to all of them and then block them so that they're the same size and then you can join them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think blocking is probably the way to go, isn't it? I know stitch patterns different, so especially if you're doing a sampler blanket, you
Right.
might find that some of your stitches are a little bit tighter, some are a little bit looser, and that makes the squares end up a different size. And probably it's a bit more advanced, but if you were to work out your gauge for each stitch pattern, you could then maybe adjust your hook,
Right.
depending on what the stitch pattern was doing.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
so you
you
could
could do that as
know.
well.
Yeah.
But a lot of
Um,
times you don't know until you've already made the squares that they don't
no,
match.
and I mean you're
And
going to
I'm
do the
not one to
square. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's true. And if you were joining squares in a Tunisian blanket, would you just do one row of single crochet kind of as normal, or would you join them just with the raw edges, or do you do both?
I would probably do one round of single crochet. I think it just finishes it off nicely. So they all
Yeah,
finished look to them, and then you can join them with slip stitch, mattress stitch, you know, whatever method you want at that point. But I
yeah,
think just one round of single crochet just adds a nice finished look to the square.
yeah, I think so too. And I feel like with Tunisian crochet, it's actually much easier to do a border than it is with regular crochet because you actually have these nice defined edges
Yeah,
on all of the edges, not just the top and bottom, and then your sides.
yeah,
You're like, oh, where do I put my hook?
that's
Um,
true.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's a good idea. Do you have a preferred method for joining squares like that? Would you do slip stitches or just whip stitch, or I guess it depends on the project.
It depends on the project. I have used slip. I feel like slip stitch is the easiest.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
it probably is for squares, isn't it?
yeah, so that's kind of my default. But I have used a mattress stitch if I don't want to see it. If I just want it to look very um mattress stitch is like seamless. Like you can't see the seam. You can't see what if they were all the same color, you probably wouldn't see where they join.
Yeah,
If you don't want that odd color, like if you're using separate colors, like one square is white, one square is green. If you use a green to whip stitch, you're going to see,
for
you know,
sure.
see the green. So I feel like the mattress stitch hides any kind of seaming very well. But it takes a little, at least for me, it takes a little longer. But I tend to lean toward that if I have the time and I really want it to look
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, for me too. I even did a video all about seaming for the Crochet Garment Summit recently, and that mattress stitch one I had to redo
Yeah,
more than once because I just could not get it right the first time, and
yeah,
especially the video you want it to look like it's all coming together really nicely,
yeah.
but I did have to do that more than once. So yeah, for sure, it gives a really nice finish, but it is not the easiest one to start
No,
with.
no,
We could
it's not. But it's worth it if
It
you
is
have a
worth it. It is worth it, and it looks great. And once you master it, I mean, it just looks like
yeah.
something you bought in a shop because it's all so neat and tidy. So let's just have a look at the comments in the chat now. So I'm just going to share this one with you because it is lovely. So Kristine, I'm doing the adventure blanket right now, and both have been your design. So that is super. So we have a few questions coming up as well. So Crochet with Ray is asking, what is the best starter blanket and or stitch for Tunisian blankets?
Um, I feel like everyone's default starter stitch is the Tunisian simple stitch.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just the easiest to learn and it makes you feel like you've learned something and it looks nice. I always after that suggest the purl stitch,
Mm-hmm.
even the knit stitch. Those are the three that are the easiest to learn. They're the most used. So even when you start combining stitches, those are the 3 that you use. And I feel like any blanket just looks nice in those. I've designed simple stitch blankets. I've designed knit stitch blankets. You know, even the purl stitch, like it just, they all look nice. So I don't think there's one that I would suggest, but I honestly would say if you've never picked up a Tunisian hook, simple stitch is probably where I would recommend you start.
Yeah, I think so too. And even if you just stick with the Tunisian simple stitch, you can do stripes, you can have multiple
Oh, yeah.
colors, you can do like a gradient effect if you're changing colors, and you can make it look really, really polished
Self-striped
and
yarn,
smooth. Yeah,
right? If you don't want to get into like changing colors, things like that. But
yeah.
Tunisia is so simple to like change the colors at the end of a row,
Mhm.
beginning of a row, or even in the middle of a row. Way easier than regular crochet.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so
way easier.
yeah, a lot more options.
Yeah, okay, that's great. So the Tunisian simple stitch or knit stitch or purl stitch. So this is a really good question too. So since each row finishes with just one loop on the hook, how do you manage all of that fabric and the weight while working through a blanket project?
That's a good question. um, I tend to have issues with the if the project's facing you. So my right. So, you know, if I'm holding the project, the right side of my blanket
Is
tends
like,
to be a little bit looser than the left side of my blanket. Um, but I know that because I've been doing this for so many years. So I have to make a conscious effort to not get tighter with the stitches from the halfway mark to the left side. I have to try and make that conscious effort to loosen up my grip because you're holding it so tight and because it starts to get heavy. You just tend to hold everything tighter, pull everything tighter because of the weight of it, and that's not what you want. So I think for me, I use a cable hook that helps with the weight of the project because then I can just let it fall off the hook. I don't have to worry about holding it. I have had issues with my wrist and my arm in the past from really heavy projects, especially heavy blanket projects. So definitely a cable hook helps with that. You don't have to necessarily hold it the same, you know, it loosens it up a little bit, and I think that's a big help. So cable stitches, trying to loosen up your grip, those are the 2 big things that I would suggest for that.
mhm. Yeah, we talked about this earlier too, more in terms of finding it difficult to keep your tension the same all the way along the row. And I think it's particularly applicable here because your row is so long.
Yeah,
And I was saying one of the things I do is I'll put it on a table. So instead of just sitting on the couch and everything is
yeah,
just going all over the place, I'll keep the
yeah.
project on a table and that does help. But I think actually you could probably just put maybe a pillow on your lap or
I've
something
done
beside you, couldn't you, to prop it up and hold
I
the weight
do.
of
I'll
that.
put a pillow on my lap if I'm watching like a movie with the kids or whatever. I'll put a pillow or a couple pillows on my lap just to so it props it up so it's like an even height rather than, you know, like one side is heavier than the other. You know, that helps as well.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's good. And I mean, yeah, like you said, just being aware that
Yeah.
the end of your row is just going to pull that little bit more so you can just try and ease up on your
Yep.
tension when you get to that. Yeah, that's a really good point too. So I have a similar question from somebody that submitted it earlier as well. And she says, is there any way to make a Tunisian crochet blanket without needing a very long cable? I have arthritis and I find it hard to hold the cable that has a lot of loops. So like we were just talking about.
Um, I mean, I feel like cable hooks are the easiest with blankets, but if you're just doing a baby blanket, you can do it with a straight hook because they're so long.
Yeah,
Um, Yeah, you can definitely do it with a straight hook. I personally would not do like a full size blanket, like a throw size or anything like that with a straight hook. I feel
yeah.
like I would have a lot of wrist issues.
Yeah, and I
um,
don't think you'd fit the loops on it anyway, would you? I mean,
yeah,
you can squish a lot on there, so for a small baby blanket, I think it would be fine. Yeah,
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 exactly.
yeah. I guess what you could do is make your blanket in squares and seam them.
You could do that.
Seam them
I
together, couldn't you?
also I have a set of hooks that the cable is adjustable. So I can do a 2-inch cable, I can do a 4-inch cable, I can do an 8-inch cable, depending on the size of the blanket. So that helps if I'm doing, if I'm doing something that isn't bulky yarn, or, if it's not a really big blanket, I don't need an 8-inch cable for it. I could use a 2 or a 4-inch cable, and that helps a little bit as well.
Yeah, that's true. Because, like we said, you can actually fit quite a lot of hoops even on that shorter cable. Yeah. There's also a method, and I don't think we have mentioned it actually anywhere in the summit. So it's called the join as you go method. So you work kind of in strips, but rather than seaming them together at the end, you'll do strip 1 and then you'll join in strip 2 and work that. So you can actually make a blanket that way, and you'd avoid having to seam at the end, and you'd avoid having to work really big sections
Exactly.
at a time. Yeah, so that would work too. I guess the only thing is it's not quite as portable as individual squares, so like the blanket is going to grow as you go along. But if you don't have the cables, or just find them too difficult to work with, I think that could be a good option as well. So yeah, you'll probably just have to Google for that one. So Tunisian join as you go, there are lots of tutorials on that, and it gives quite a nice effect actually. You can't even really tell that it was done in different sections. So I think that could be a good one as well. Okay, so we have another question here. What stitch patterns would you recommend for a blanket using bulky weight yarn? I don't want it to be too heavy.
I would stay away from the knit stitch. The knit stitch for me tends to be a little more dense, so it gets heavier faster. Simple stitch is good. Even the purl stitch tends to have a lot of drape to it. You could also always go up a hook size or 2. So because it's not as open or lacy or airy as regular crochet, you can go up a hook size and you still get that solid fabric, but it just gives it a better drape and it's not as heavy. You could always try that as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'd imagine a bulky weight Tunisian blanket would be finished quite quickly. I think if you were using a really big hook, it sounds
like one of my daughters used to have trouble sleeping, and I used super bulky yarn, and I held 2 together with a very giant Tunisian hook. I think it was like and it was pretty much done in no time, because you're using 2 skeins at a time of super bulky weight, and she sleeps really good now. So if you're ever looking for a weighted blanket that's handmade, that's
that is a great idea. I love that. I feel like I even want to make one of those for myself.
Yeah.
But where I am at the moment, it's too hot, so we're at the stage of the year now where it's just like a sheet on the bed. So for the winter, though, I'd have it finished anyway, wouldn't I, in time for the winter? We started it now. So we have an interesting question here, actually, and I'm curious about this too. So I have started a blanket for my husband with a USMC emblem on it, and I've tried using Tunisian simple stitch and then cross-stitching the emblem, but it didn't look right. Have you tried this? That's an interesting technique, isn't it?
I have seen it done. I have not tried it.
Yeah,
I did a totally different. I didn't do Marine Corps, but I did an Ohio State blanket for my boyfriend for Christmas. I just used simple stitch and I changed colors, and it was a lot of colors, but it came out gorgeous. And it came out great. I have not tried the cross stitch method.
Yeah, I have seen it done as well. And it looks really good. I think if you were fairly careful that your stitches and rows were the same height, so you're getting a square to do that.
Yeah, you have to make sure not to pull the cross stitch and make it tighter. You make the, yeah.
I think it could turn out great. Send us a picture if you do finish it. We would love to see it. Okay, let's just go back to the other questions. So this is a good one. I think you'll have a good answer for this. I have heard that Tunisian crochet uses way more yarn than normal crochet. I'm afraid that I will start a large blanket and then end up having to spend way too much on yarn. How can I work out how much I will need?
I have heard the same thing, and I do not experience it. So I don't really know how to answer that. I have always heard Tunisian takes more yarn. I've heard 25% more. I've heard a lot more. My Tunisian blankets don't tend to take a lot more yarn than
Mhm.
my regular blankets. Um, and I don't know why. I don't genuinely, I don't know. And maybe I'll research this because it would be a good blog post. um,
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to do a swatch of the same size with the different methods and just see
yeah.
which one uses the most yarn.
That's actually probably the best way to do it. I mean, I don't know if they're comparing it to single crochet. Like, what are they comparing it to? You kind of have to, are you comparing apples and oranges? Like,
Yeah, I know what you
are
mean.
you comparing it to double crochet, which is kind of lighter, you know? Um, Mine don't take a ton more. And I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know. I also go up 2 to 3 hook sizes from what the yarn recommends. So
Yeah,
I assume if the yarn recommends an H and you're using like an H or an I for Tunisian, that is going to take a lot more yarn. Now you're comparing them equally, like an
uh-huh.
H for single crochet and an H hook for like a simple stitch. That would definitely use more yarn. But if you're actually going up to like an I or a J hook, like you should be, I don't find it's taking a lot more yarn, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's probably like a drape thing that if you go up
Right.
enough hook sizes, um, yeah, you're not going to be using a huge amount of
Right.
yarn. Yeah, I think that's probably right. And I mean, if you want to figure out the size for anything that you're making, the answer is gauge.
Yeah.
So make a swatch, measure how much you have in 4 inches by 4 inches, and then use that to calculate how many
Yeah.
stitches and rows you'll need for your finished blanket. So it's kind of the same no matter what you were making.
Yeah.
But in theory, you should not need too much extra yarn for Tunisian. So hopefully.
Yeah.
So let me just have a look back at the chat here. So our person who had the question about the cross stitch is asking, did you carry your yarn when you changed colours? So this is for your blanket with
No,
the motif on it.
I did not carry it. I had a lot of different colors going at once. I didn't want to carry it. It's harder to carry it in Tunisian. I feel like it's easy if you're like doing a single crochet or double crochet and you can
Yeah,
add.
mm.
Oh, you can't do that really in Tunisian.
Mm.
So I had all the different colors. I had mini skeins of all the different colors, and I had a lot of ends to tie in. But the finished product, I was totally happy with it. It took a little more work in the process of it, but it was worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you just let the ends, each strand hang out the back, and then you picked it up
Yeah,
when
so
you
I would
needed to.
drop a color, like I would drop the red and pick up black, and then on the way back, I would drop the black and pick up the red and
Yeah.
finish. So they all finished where they started. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I still haven't mastered not getting things tangled whenever I'm doing color
Oh
work.
no, they get, but it was still worth
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Alrighty, we're coming to the end of the questions. I think I just have one or two more. So this question is, how do you choose your colors for a project, especially if you're making something large like a blanket?
I am a single color girl. I use a color wheel. If I really want multiple colors, I go back to a color wheel because I feel like for me that's just confirmation. Like I need that confirmation because I don't, not that I'm not confident in it. Like I know what I like, but I want to make sure it's complementary, you know? And so I
Yeah.
feel color wheel is always just good to refer back to if you're trying to pick out multiple colors and you don't want, like that's where they get the if you use like self-striping yarn, if you look, a lot of those colors are complementary to each other on a color wheel. So if you want to go pick your own, that's kind of what I refer back to. If I find colors I like together, chances are, I mean, I've been doing this long enough. I kind of know what the color wheel looks like. I don't really have to like pull it up on my phone every time, but I try and use that as a reference point.
Yeah, that's a good idea, I think, because I find it quite hard to just eyeball colours too
Yeah.
and sort of match them up. But I think if you have somewhere to start from, yeah,
Yeah.
that helps a lot. And I mean, it depends who you're making it for and everything. There's lots of
Yeah, exactly.
choosing the colours, aren't there? Okay, so I think we are just coming to the half hour, so we will start to wrap up. So Kristine, I'm just going to share some of your links in the chat here, and you're also in the process of launching a new website, teaching people everything they need to know about Tunisian crochet. So do you just want to tell us a little bit about that while I am
Yeah,
going?
I have had the URL Learn Tunisian Crochet for years, but I always had it pointed to Ambassador Crochet. I just didn't have the time, and I had so much Tunisian resources on my Ambassador Crochet website that at the time it just made sense to point it there. But now I realize I have so much that I could just talk about just Tunisian that I've really been trying. My goal was to have it all set up and launched by today. It's kind of a soft launch in the process. It's not perfect, I promise, if you go look at it. But yeah, I'm going to be adding resources over the next week or two. I'm hoping to get it fully, all my tutorials up and stuff like that, and my Tunisian patterns, up on that site, so that, they'll still be on my Ambassador Crochet site just because they've always been housed there. But I want separate. I want people to. Some people just don't want to have to weed through all the crochet stuff. They're just focused on Tunisian right now. So I think it's a good time for me to just have that focus for people that want that right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea because most, not all, but a lot of designers, they have a mix of both. So you do actually have to actively go looking
Yeah.
for the Tunisian stuff. So I think having a separate website is fantastic. So I've just put the link in the chat there so you can go and sign up to follow the updates on that website. And I'm sure Kristine will be adding loads to it over the next few weeks. So it could be good timing. The summit will end and then we'll be starting to
Thank you.
get our extra resources together. So let us finish up there. I think I'm just going to pop the link for the VIP pass in again. So if you haven't heard me mention this before, this pass is available for all Summit attendees, and it just means that you can get lifetime access to all of the classes that we're hosting over the next couple of days. You'll get all of these Q&A replays, and you will get 14 Tunisian crochet patterns contributed by our designers so that you can practice your skills long after the summit has ended. So if you think you're going to want to continue on the journey or that you're going to want to refer back to any of these videos, I think that is a really good option. And we just have one more question, Kristine, and I think we might just have to Google it, but Nessa is asking, do you have some tutorials for different joins for Tunisian crochet? So I don't have any bar the join as you go. I think that is on my YouTube channel, but I don't have any for specific seaming.
I don't have any tutorials. If she's just looking for a suggestion, you could always, I mean, it's not really a Tunisian join, but like you can just crochet the back loops together of, if you're joining together, things like that. But that's not really a Tunisian join per se.
Yeah, I think probably most of the joining methods that you would use with regular crochet, you could use here. And it might even be easier because like we said, those right and left edges are a bit more consistent, aren't they, in Tunisian than they are in regular crochet. So yeah, I think whatever your preferred seaming method is with regular crochet, you could apply that here. Alrighty, I think we will leave it there. So thank you, Kristine, so much for joining us and sharing all of your Tunisian crochet knowledge with us. So I am going to be back here in about 30 minutes with our next Q&A. And let me just remind myself who it is with. So this is with Courtney from Creations by Courtney, and she is a wealth of knowledge on Tunisian crochet as well. So do come back for that. All right, take care, everybody.